Alright guys, so we're going to take another trip over to the United Kingdom, where I was previously under the impression that Piers Morgan is as bad as it gets when it comes to British commentators on the issue of Israel and Gaza, but these two guys that you see on your screen right here, over at Talk TV, are somehow going to dive into depths that I didn't even think were possible. So this is a debate that they were having with a communist. Fiona Lali is her name. She is a representative or a public-facing persona from the United Kingdom Communist Revolutionary Party. And this is just going to devolve into absolute madness, right? So at the end of this debate, these two guys are going to get cooked so hard that they actually just shut off the entire conversation and run to commercial break. So let's just go ahead and jump into this and try to make sense of it as we go.
Next guest this evening, Fiona Lali, is joining me here, and we're going to try and talk without losing our tempers about the problems in the Middle East at the moment, in Gaza. And before we talk, Fiona, let me tell you what I want. I want to see the end of all wars. I want to see the end of all people being killed. I want to see the end of all religion as well, but that's a personal thing, and I don't mind whatever religion people want to follow. They can do whatever they like, as long as they keep it to themselves.
Okay, so fair enough, so far, right? So far, he says he's against all wars, he's against people being killed. Now let's see how he flips on a dime and justifies a genocide.
So that's where I am. So I cannot understand, and perhaps you can actually explain to me, why we seem to have so much anti-Semitism in this country at the moment, mainly amongst younger people.
I don't think that's the case. I think that you saying, and you're not the only one who says it, Michael Gove the other day came out on the news and
don't compare me with him, please.
Quite similar, well, he accused my party of being anti-Semitic as well as other people. In connection with this issue of Palestine, because actually what we have in the moment in Britain is a huge movement developing over Palestine. Obviously across different universities we've seen these encampments starting, students coming out
getting very violent.
They're not getting violent,
They're
actually.
Not. I've seen some.
Or did you see the video of the police in Oxford just a couple of days ago arresting students and assaulting students?
They weren't assaulting
in America
them, they were arresting
well.
them. And if a policeman arrests you, the best thing to do, and I've been arrested once or twice, the best thing to do is just to go quietly, okay? Rather than telling them to, well, whatever students feel they should be able to tell a policeman, if they're going to put the handcuffs on you, let them do it, take you to the police station, sort it out there. If you want to fight, then they'll probably have
you admit that police are being violent then?
No, I don't. I admit that the police, I don't think they're being tough enough. I think the people who are screaming from the river to the sea, death to Jews, various other horrific things that I know you probably deny, but they keep on shouting them. It's
and never about any other warfare.
And they aren't shouting them in that. They aren't shouting them in that video. And that's,
they project it onto the Big Ben, didn't they?
The video bit showed a policeman fairly strenuously arresting a couple of guys, or a couple of policemen.
There, it's on all of the protests.
Well, then don't go and make such a nuisance of yourself.
So you don't think people have the right to protest?
Not in that way.
Exactly, right? I mean, notice how, first off, he says the protests have been violent. Now, to be fair, I haven't been keeping up with the student protests and encampments that have been taking place over in the UK, but I have been actually going to some of the protests that have been taking place here in the United States. And what we've seen is that our media, I'm guessing very similar to the UK's media, has been smearing these protests as being violent even when they're completely non-violent. We've seen actual studies that were done here in the United States. There was one done by the LA Times showing that like 99% of these protests were not only peaceful, but a vast majority of them didn't even involve any property destruction. And you can see that his conflation of violence there, right? When he starts to talk about slogans, okay? And he brings up two different things. He says, death to the Jews. I've never heard that at a single left-wing pro-Palestine protest. And then he says, from the river to the sea, which is not an anti-Semitic phrase. And then the implication that he's giving there is that people should be arrested for using phrases that he doesn't agree with, that he doesn't like. So yeah, you're against free speech. You don't believe that people have the right to protest if it's making a public nuisance, which, believe it or not, is kind of like the whole fucking point of protests. And so yeah, I mean, you can't claim like, oh, I'm a free speech proponent, and then be calling for the cops to be more brutal against the students who they have already been brutalizing. The vast majority of any violence that has taken place at these protests has come from either the police or it's come from Zionist counter-protesters. So they continue here.
the right
not
to
in a
free
violent
speech.
way. Not in a violent way.
I think really what this represents
Go on,
is
tell us.
the media.
Because you're quite
and-
young and you've got no idea what you're talking about,
Right,
have
so the
you? You're
media
annoying me
and
already.
other people are doing everything they can to shut down people talking about
That's rubbish.
what's happening.
We've
in
got you
Gaza.
in here.
You've just done it now. You're speaking
I
over
haven't
me.
Well, we've
shut
actually
you down.
got you here. We wouldn't even have you here if that was
Okay,
correct,
sure.
would we?
So what I'm saying is that the police and Suella Braverman and other people have tried very, very hard to clamp down on the Palestine movement, and that's really what makes you angry. That's what makes other people angry, is the fact that actually the Palestine movement is growing, despite the fact that you and others keep trying to smear it.
But they
with
attacked
this
counter-protesters. We
accusation
saw
of
the Iranian guy.
anti-Semitism.
They attacked
and
him,
it
didn't
doesn't
they?
work anymore.
Can you
It doesn't
wait,
work anymore.
Sorry,
listen to what I'm
sorry,
saying.
sorry.
Listen.
Go on, you
They
start.
attacked the Iranian guy who was protesting, saying Hamas is terrorists, which obviously, I mean, do you agree they're terrorists?
course you
Raping
do.
The
women
question of Hamas is not relevant
Isn't it?
to
No, it is,
why
'cause I
the
just asked it.
Palestine movement is taking place.
No,
and
but hold
why
on, you're
these
not helping
protests-
Palestinians either.
and why these
They're a terrorist
protests-
subjugating government.
I'm actually
they're
working
killing Palestinians.
every day. I'm
they're
working
killing Palestinians.
every single day.
You're
Who is
work- you're-
killing Palestinians?
Hamas.
The Israeli state,
Hamas.
the
Do you know what
IDF,
Hamas are?
with
They're a terrorist organisation.
Can I
They're an
just-
authoritarian.
sorry, can I just-
They cut the
Yeah,
heads
all
off
right,
their
just,
own people.
Just a minute. When
They really do think that that's just a debate ender, right? Well, our government, we've labeled them as a terrorist organization. They are a terrorist organization. End of discussion. Nothing else needs to be talked about. None of the violence that's been, directed against Palestinians throughout the last number of decades, none of the violence during this ongoing genocide in Gaza, that's all irrelevant. It's actually just Hamas that's killing Palestinians, right? Israel hasn't done anything. All of the civilian deaths, these some, 40,000 at this point, including upwards of 15,000 children, Israel has nothing to do with that. It's just Hamas. Right?
when were you last actually in that part of the world?
What I haven't been to Palestine.
Haven't
I don't
you?
need to be to
Oh,
I have.
Palestine. Okay, that's very good. There's
What
many
are your
Palestinians.
thoughts about the
Can I just say something?
No,
There's
just
many
answer my
Palestinians who
question.
What kind of a question is that? When was the last time you were in Gaza? I'm sorry, are you under the impression that people can just freely leave and go into Gaza right now? Israel won't even allow journalists into Gaza. What are you asking?
cannot go to Palestine because of the policies of Israel,
All right.
who are backed by Western
Right,
imperialism.
right.
That's what this is about.
This is not
and
about
when you
it.
make it, it's not
It's
about.
not about it,
It's
no.
not about America
It is-
and
it is
Britain.
about-
Most of them are
funding
Arab Jews that
and
came to Israel. Most of
funding
the
and
Jews in
trying
Israel came from the
to-
Arab lands when they were kicked
How
out.
are you convinced? Because what you're convinced by is the Hamas-generated social media. Well, they are doing a great job, by the way. They're doing a really
Well,
good
they've
job on
admitted the
social media.
35,000 figure is wrong now.
But you're believing everything you see on social media rather than things when a super brain like myself says it.
I mean, he says that somewhat ironically, it seems like he's kind of doing a joke right there, but he's really not, because why else would you be asking that question? I mean, first off, the idea that social media is filled with a bunch of Hamas propaganda, no, it's not. It's just young people are on social media platforms, especially ones like TikTok that they're trying to ban right now, and on TikTok, people have had more of an opportunity to just show the reality of what is actually happening on the ground without having to first go through the filter, the mouthpiece of jackasses like you in the mainstream media, right? That's the difference, is that we scroll on our feeds and we see just an endless stream of IDF soldiers posting their war crimes gleefully online, and then an endless stream of children being pulled from the rubble by the thousands for 7 months straight. I mean, yeah, young people are not going to like that. I think any reasonable person should not like that, right? But he thinks this is just it's Hamas propaganda, and you'd be better off if you were just watching Talk TV all day, I guess.
Joe Biden this week
Joe
also
Biden's an idiot.
is he also an
Fair.
agent of Hamas then to you potentially? Because he said that
He gave
30,000
Iran
people-
$6 billion.
He gave the figure of
He's an
30,000
idiot.
people dead.
Let's be clear about something. He didn't give Iran $6 billion. Okay, he temporarily unfroze some of the money that we had been withholding, that we had essentially been stealing from Iran. So that's kind of a different thing. He wasn't giving a weapons package to the Iranians. But I love how he earnestly tried to answer her question and it was a hypothetical question. It was a question that didn't really need an answer, where she says, is Joe Biden Hamas? And he actually tries to answer that in the affirmative, to say, yeah, he is Hamas because he gave the Iranians $6 billion.
He
in
is
Palestine.
an
So
idiot.
But that's been
you can
debunked.
pretend-
That's been
you can
debunked by
pretend-
Hamas even.
Okay, sure.
Can I
You need
ask
to
one
catch up. You're
Let's
actually not
central-
informed
Calm down.
about that.
Can I ask one question? What are your views? Tell me what you think of the people who committed the atrocities on October the 7th.
I think that you're asking me this question
why
to
can't you
pretend
just answer
you
the
care,
question?
it.
to pretend you care about the people
Why
who
don't you
died.
just
I need
answer
to-
the
I'll
question?
ask it because I care. I know some of the people.
The reason that people pose this question is because they want to defend Israel's right to continue its genocide,
Well, that is
to
why they're
continue
doing
its
it.
ethnic
It's not a
cleansing,
genocide, is it?
to continue its
It's not
ethnic cleansing
genocide.
of the
How can
Palestinians.
35,000, if the Hamas
Because
figures are accepted, be genocide from 2 million
Israel, how many would be a genocide?
2 million people.
Okay, so then you just don't know what the word genocide means. You just don't know what the definition of genocide is under international law. You don't need to completely wipe out the entire population of Gaza for it to be a genocide. That's not how this works, okay? You could have a genocide that's just a few thousand people. There have been people who have been, and countries that have been prosecuted for genocides that are of a lower amount of casualties than what we've already seen inside of Gaza. The definition of genocide under international law is actually not that complicated. It's kind of complicated to prove it at the International Court of Justice, but it's basically just destroying a population, an ethnic population, or a religious population in whole or in part, right? In an intentional way. You have to prove the intent aspect of it, which Israel has made very easy for the judges at the ICJ because they're constantly talking about how they love committing genocide. So, if you're going to have a conversation about this, if you're going to, very confidently state that it's not a genocide, I don't know, maybe go on Google for like 2 seconds and just look up the definition of genocide under international law. But maybe that's too much for these guys.
A million and a
No,
half.
let's just
35,000 can't.
stop talking.
No, you can't be. Can
Stop talking.
Idiocy.
Can we shut the flip up?
Every war is genocide.
Can we
according to
just? I mean, you will go. I will
didn't
sack
say
you.
that.
I will
you.
sack
Israel
you.
have killed the smallest
Ash,
amount of
can you be
innocent people
quiet a
that
minute?
there's ever been in modern warfare. I'm just
shut
make
up.
it a fact. Just
Now
saying
the
a fact.
producer's telling you, and if you don't shut up, you're going to
I'm
have to
I've
go.
got to make
No.
facts. I've got to.
No.
It has to do. It
The
has to be
fact
done.
is that genocide or ethnic cleansing would have resulted in the whole of that area of being finished by now.
Right.
And the Israeli.
No, again, I mean it's in the literal first words of the definition of genocide under the Genocide Convention. It's in whole or in part. Now, if you want to have a conversation about the total amount of destruction that Israel has done inside of Gaza in less than a year's time, they've destroyed the entire healthcare system. They've destroyed the entire education system, including doing controlled demolitions of university buildings. They've attacked mosques and schools and churches and hospitals and UN shelters and refugee camps. They've attacked farmland. They've destroyed the water systems inside of Gaza. I mean, how far do we want to go? A majority of the housing inside of Gaza has been destroyed. The entire population of Gaza has been, at this point, internally displaced. There's now a man-made famine in the north of Gaza. How much destruction? Does it need to be literally every single building in Gaza has to be razed to the ground for this to be a genocide to these guys?
The army are doing everything they can to try and stop.
That's funny.
goodness sake.
Genocide looks like
Israeli
October the
army
7th, what
are
Hamas
not
did.
doing everything they can. The Israeli army and the Israeli government have
Did he just say October 7th was a genocide? The same guy who 30 seconds ago was saying that you need to kill the entire population of a given people for it to be a genocide? I mean, this is how you know they're just deeply unserious people, right?
made it quite clear exactly what they want to do.
Tell me what
which is
you
to
should-
continue cleansing and driving all of the
that's ridiculous.
Palestinians
You
out
talk
of
crap.
that land.
There's no point
and
with
the
it.
Just
reason
go.
that
Shut
they're
up.
doing that,
Just-
you've invited me onto
Yeah,
the
we're
show to hear my
disinviting you
views,
now.
and now you're trying to stop
Yeah,
me
that's
from
right. Yeah, you talk crap.
exposing
You're
the
not
truth of
you're
what
not
you people
exposing
what
the
you
truth.
You're
people
lying.
do.
You're telling
I am
lies.
exposing the
Listen,
truth.
I didn't want this. I want this to
exposing
go
the truth.
properly. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes, right, to state what you think nobody is actually agreeing. I want you to put your whole point forward. No interrupting from you, or I'll take your microphone. And just make everybody know. Go for it.
The reason why politicians and other presenters, particularly in Britain and particularly in the West, are doing so much to try and pretend that Israel has the right to do what it's doing is because Israel is a key ally of Western imperialism, a key ally of America in that whole region. The US and Israel have a trade relationship worth billions. And it's not just the US, there's multinational corporations that are advertising real estate in Gaza. What this comes down to is imperialist interests across the whole of the Middle East and the drive to continue that going, because British imperialism many years ago, nearly 100 years ago, took land that wasn't theirs and tried to give it away to another people. And that was a crime, and it's a crime that has continued ever since then up until now, and the Palestinians are suffering a horrific experience because of that. And what I'm interested in is organising people, is organising students to fight against that, to fight against
What's
a
your goal, though?
genocide.
What's the goal, though?
And my goal
Two
is to
minutes.
end capitalism. My goal is to end imperialism.
Your goal,
my goal is to
your
stop
goal is to end.
war.
You've had more than 2 minutes, right? Your goal is to stop fascism. What you're saying, fascism and war and killing and everything else. But you're prepared to fight to do that, physically fight to do that. Is that
I'm
what
not
you're
physically fighting anyone. I'm trying to organise students. I'm trying to organise young
people. You want
people.
them to fight.
I want mass demonstrations.
Yeah.
I want a mass movement.
That's talking about violence. You're quite happy
I'm
with
not.
the
She just said a mass mobilization, a mass movement of people to protest against this genocide. Nowhere in what she just said did she advocate for violence. He's making this shit up in his head. He's shadowboxing with non-existent demons and ghosts in front of him. I mean, what a ridiculous response. Everything that she just laid out there in terms of the history of the British Empire supporting the original foundations of Zionism inside of Palestine, and then supporting the establishment of a Palestinian state, and then after World War II, the United States Empire taking up that mantle to back the Zionist project and this continuous ethnic cleansing that's been going on for decades of the Palestinian people. Every single thing that she just outlined there is 100% correct. And then she turns around and they say, what's the goal? And she says the goal is a mass mobilization of people who believe that apartheid is wrong, genocide is wrong, ethnic cleansing is wrong, and we are going to go take to the streets to protest against that. And his response is to say, well, I guess what is the implication? Basically, you're the same as like Hamas, or you're violent because you want people to protest these things. I mean, it's just it's so unserious.
violence to
Talking
get
about
your
violence.
way. Well, you
I
are.
haven't said anything
Right.
about violence.
Now, you said your 2
haven't
minutes.
said
Hang on,
anything
you
about
said your 2
violence.
minutes, and you blamed the media, the politicians, Western imperialism, and
Yes.
all of that stuff that's made you have the life you have. You have to. No,
Well, I don't need to, but I
you
just
have
want
2
to
minutes.
ask you, I mean, what should Israel have done in response to that October the 7th attack?
Israel should never have started the Nakba
All right,
in the
yeah, but
first
I-
place
but
with
all
the
right,
backing
but what
of
should it have
Western
done? Should it-
imperialism and
okay.
the expulsion of
So should it have just done
700,000
nothing after?
Palestinians.
Should it have just done nothing on
Why?
October 7th?
What
What should it have done?
Not what it is currently doing.
What should
And
it have
it's
done
not
on
just
October
about-
7th?
it's not
What
about-
should it have done
What
on
about
October
October the 6th? What about October the 5th?
Well, they were firing
what
missiles
about the
then as well.
last, how many
They've been firing
decades
missiles for 20 years.
in which Israel has been sowing all of the
They
violence
left
in
lock,
that
stock and
whole
barrel in
reason?
2005.
Sorry?
They left in 2005, lock, stock and barrel.
Are you suggesting
Yeah, they pulled out their settlers in 2005 and then began a 17-year-long total blockade of Gaza, okay?
that the Israeli state hasn't been continually oppressing and using violence
they've
and
been
attacking
firing missiles,
all
Hamas.
of the Palestinians?
What they did, Israel left in
trapping
2005.
them in an
Well, hold on, let
open-air
me answer
prison.
that. They left in 2005, and then they thought, well, we better watch the borders in case, stop weapons getting in, which they were right to do, obviously. And what they should have done at that point in Gaza is developed it into a tourist destination and become great and open the borders and become peaceful instead of doing this. But what should, I ask
They're
you
not
again,
interested
what
in
should
peace.
Israel have done after
They're not
October?
interested in
What
peace.
should Israel have done after October the 7th?
They're not interested in peace in any way or
You're a
in any
mind reader
You're going to
as well.
answer it. You're going to answer it.
I have answered it.
Yeah, what should Israel have done on October?
She's going to get to this here, but the very simple answer to that question, this is something that Piers Morgan asks a lot as well. What should Israel have done after October 7th? The answer is end the occupation, okay? Address the underlying conditions that gave rise to October 7th in the first place. October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. It didn't come out of nowhere. You have to end the occupation, end the apartheid, and allow Palestinians to live with sovereignty and dignity. That's what you have to do in order to avoid another October 7th. Addressing what happened on October 7th through military means, as we've seen demonstrated over the last 7-8 months at this point, that is not going to be effective. You're not going to be able to take out Hamas through military means. It has to be a political solution. If you don't want Hamas in power, then don't continuously occupy and ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people, and then you won't have violent factions that turn around to try to violently resist that occupation. I mean, it's not that complicated, but she continues here.
Israel
So they
should
should have
not
just done
do
nothing.
what it's currently doing.
So what should I do? Nothing.
As if there's no daylight between Israel doing absolutely nothing after October 7th versus what they're doing right now. They had no choice but to bomb these schools and mosques and churches and refugee camps, to kill 15,000 kids, to kill 40,000 people. No other choice, right? There's no other options on the table between that and doing literally nothing. I mean, what are we talking about?
Israel should not do
You
what
can't
it's
answer that,
currently
can you?
doing. I can answer
What should
it.
I do on October the 8th?
End the occupation, end
They
the
weren't
oppression
in
of the
there. Stop it now. Let her
Palestinians,
answer.
end the exploitation that's taking place, stop the
So
settlers that are going
after-
to take more land,
after-
stop holding
just a minute.
Palestinian
One moment.
prisoners
Forget the hostages
in
then as well.
tortures.
You're,
Israel is
are you
not
a
even
Mu-
interested
are
in
you a
freeing the
Muslim?
hostages.
Are you a
Of
Muslim?
course not.
No, I'm
Oh,
not
it's a
Muslim.
shame. Because I was going to say, we have the Jewish side and we have, okay, you're Christian or nothing.
It's not about religion.
Isn't it? Well, it
It's not
seems to
about
be.
religion. It's about imperialism.
Hamas seem to
and
think it's about religion.
It's about
But
imperialism.
the majority of
And
Israel is made up of Arab Jews from the Arab lands that were kicked out.
That's not the point. The point
Oh,
is
that's not imperialist,
the point
is it?
there's a state that is doing everything
Jewish
it can
state, indigenous Jewish state.
to drive hundreds of thousands
Could I
of
ask
people
you-
out, and it's
Yeah,
nothing to do with the
guys,
fact
I think we're
that
going to
they're
have to
Jewish.
finish because
It's
a
nothing
break
to do with
coming
the
up.
fact
We
that
shouldn't have
they're
bothered
Jewish.
having her on.
A break is coming up in a minute, but what would you have done about Adolf Hitler? What would you have done about that
I
situation?
could tell you what communists were doing.
What?
Communists were fighting as much as they could to stop the rise of Hitler in Germany at that time.
True.
But you don't want to have a serious
Palestinians
discussion.
were, though,
You
weren't
don't want to have a
serious
serious
conversation
question
with you
about
because
fascism.
everything
What you're
you've
interested
said-
in doing is defending
Everything-
Israel.
Stalin and Hitler invaded Poland together.
Everything-
Stalin
I've got
sided
nothing to do
with-
I've got
You
nothing
don't
to
know
do with
history, do
Stalin.
you?
Ash, she doesn't. She's
Stalin
young.
was with Hitler before.
But you-
Yeah, Stalin was with Hitler. That's why tens of millions of Soviets at the time died fighting Hitler, right? That's the history that this guy understands.
You absolutely think that if Israel were put down their weapons tomorrow and just walk away, you think Hamas would leave it?
I think that in order for there to be genuine peace
You're not answering
across
the
that
question,
whole
no.
region,
Don't answer.
we need to end capitalism, end imperialism,
Yeah.
which is the driving force for all of
What
the
do you do
problems
as a
that are
job?
taking place there.
Do you have a job?
I work for the Revolutionary Communist Party, and I organise people, I organise young people, and
Do you know what
workers
you're doing,
who want
don't
to
you?
see
Can I be
an
quite
end
honest?
to
Yeah.
genocide.
You are going.
You're not going to be honest.
You,
but go
I'm
ahead.
being. Everything I say.
She's
is
a mind
honest.
reader, remember?
Yeah.
She can read minds.
Everything you're doing is going to cause major conflict in this country.
I am not responsible
Everything
for any
people
conflict.
like you
the British
and
government,
who are
which
promoting
is
that-
supporting and facilitating
that's
a
what people
genocide
like you
right now,
always say.
are responsible for conflict because it's true.
Why don't you
And
wanna
know
live in
what
a
other
communist
people-
country?
Other people's.
Why
other
don't you wanna
people
live in a
think
communist?
that. There is no communist country for me
If
to
you
go.
don't,
for me
hang
to
on,
go
just a
and live
minute.
in.
If you don't like living in this country, which obviously you don't, why don't you go and live somewhere where it's better than Britain?
Why
You've
would I
slagged
live?
us
Why
off.
would I live somewhere
Well,
else
well,
when
because
I?
I mean, this is just the classic. Oh, so you want to improve the country that you live in? Why don't you just leave and go somewhere else? It's like, no, man, I live here. I'm an American. I live in the center of global capitalism, okay? And I'm a socialist. I advocate for the things that I advocate for because I want to improve the country. I don't just want to leave the country and go somewhere else.
Obviously,
change
you
this
don't like
country.
this
You can't
country.
Because I
change
can. Why would I live somewhere else when I can change the country
You can't
that I
change
live in?
this country.
Okay.
You won't change
You
it.
delete
Well, let's wait and see because the truth
The
is
wokists are
there are
going,
so
and we
many
are getting
people,
back to how we
the
used to
defining
be.
feature of politics in this country is that young people hate the political establishment. They hate the status
I have
quo.
been
It's
young.
not all
And
about
they-
young people.
and-
Why do you think young people have more of a
Why do
more
you
of a
think
say?
you have
It's
more
not
of a
just
say?
young people. The majority
you think
of
young people are more important.
The majority
But the
of people.
majority of people
the
don't
majority
agree
of
with
peop-
you.
The majority
And you just
of
laugh a
people
lot.
in Britain don't support what
Why
the
do you
government
think
is
this
doing
is
in
funny,
Gaza.
by the way?
They don't
If
support.
you had a sensible and serious face, I'd take you more seriously. But you smile, and you're doing it now throughout what I think is one of the most dangerous times. I think we are on the verge of the Third World War.
Right.
And I don't consider people like you will be of any use whatsoever because you get called up to go to the forces. You won't go, will you?
I
Will
don't
you?
think we're on the verge of the Third World
Well, I
War.
think we
And
are,
if we-
particularly with people who are behaving
Funny,
in the way
isn't it?
you
Yeah, very
are.
funny.
But it's funny, is it? It's funny. Do you know how many people get killed in a world war?
Oh, so you
I know
do
you're
care
consi-
about people dying.
I said
but
that
not
at the beginning.
Palestinians, but you're
I care
lying.
about.
You're a hypocrite. If you cared about
Break
people
now.
dying,
Break
if you
now.
cared about people dying,
Break.
thousands of people
Now.
are dying today
Break.
in Sudan, in Darfur.
Now.
Why are you
Thousands-
smart?
Oh my god. What an ending to that. I mean, listen, the reason she was smiling during parts of that is because you two are completely fucking unserious people. You're not interested in having a conversation. There wasn't a single point that she made throughout that entire conversation that they responded to or listened to or even seemed to understand in any way, shape, or form. The reason she's smiling is because it's a ridiculous conversation that you guys are having. I mean, you guys are dancing around using the same standard, IDF talking points that you want to pull out of your ass. You have no interest in talking about the underlying conditions of what's led to this conflict. It's all just everything is isolated in a vacuum to what happened on October 7th, and because of what happened on October 7th, everything that Israel is doing in Gaza is completely justified, which, by the way, is kind of a weird argument to make, right? Because the idea that they're trying to get across here is that Hamas is an evil, brutal, savage, terrorist organization. Why? Because they killed innocent Israeli civilians. That's the argument. And the extension of the argument, as they're laying it out there, is that because Hamas is evil, because they kill civilians, therefore Israel is justified to kill 40 times the amount of civilians in order to go after Hamas. Does that make sense to people? I mean, we just covered the other day. It was like almost 50 people, 50 Palestinians in Gaza were killed in an airstrike when they were bombing refugees inside of tents. And then Israel's initial justification was that, well, we think that there were 2 Hamas guys in that area. That's the justification. So this is what Israel calls a precision strike, is killing dozens of innocent people in order to go after a few supposed Hamas guys. And we don't even have confirmation that they actually killed them in that strike. But that's the kind of sick, twisted logic that's being deployed here. The logic really relies on valuing Palestinian life less than Israeli life. There's no other possible way you can justify what they are doing inside of Gaza right now. So credit to Fiona there in that conversation. I don't know how you even get through that conversation. I understand why she was like uncomfortably smiling at certain parts of it, because again, it's completely ridiculous. We know all the talking points at this point. Young people, especially disproportionately, it's not just young people, but mostly young people, are just fed up with it. We're not having it anymore. We're not buying into this mainstream propaganda that you guys are trying to sell.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying